Welcome to the deep dive. Ready to get up close and personal with female anatomy?
Sounds intriguing.
We're going on a journey exploring the external and internal landscapes of the reproductive system.
Ooh, a deep dive into the anatomy. I'm in.
You bet. Our guide. Excerpts from the Merck Manual.
Oh, the Merck Manual. Consider this our backstage pass to understanding how it all works.
Exactly. We're talking about the symphony of structures, that make reproduction possible.
A symphony, I like that. It's a symphony that's often misunderstood, I'd say.
For sure. So let's shine a light on things, starting with, well, the vulva. It's got some pretty big responsibilities, right?
Big responsibilities, absolutely. Like what?
Well, it lets sperm in, it keeps infections out, and of course plays a vital role in pleasure and lubrication.
Right, right. And it's amazing how each part is perfectly designed to do those things. Like take the Mons pubis, for example.
Mons pubis. Most people probably just think of it as a mound of tissue.
Yeah, but did you know it's a key player in attraction?
Attraction. Oh yeah, I remember reading something about pheromones.
Bingo. The Mons pubis houses these glands that secrete pheromones. Those fascinating chemical messengers.
Pheromones, those are the things that play a role in like how we perceive and are attracted to others, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So attraction isn't just about what we see, it's a whole chemical conversation happening too.
Wow, that's so cool. Our bodies sending out secret signals. So from the Mons pubis, we move to the labia majora and minora. What's the main difference between those two?
Good question. The labia majora, those are like the outer guardians, covered with skin, just like the rest of our bodies.
Makes sense. And the labia minora.
Well, they're more delicate, lined with a mucous membrane that's super sensitive to touch.
Oh, so that's why they're so sensitive. And I've heard the labia minora actually change during arousal, don't they?
You heard right. During arousal, they become engorged with blood.
Engorged with blood. That's got to increase their sensitivity, right?
Got it. It gets them prepped for potential intercourse, too.
Amazing how our bodies adapt like that. And speaking of adaptation, we can't forget about the perineum.
The perineum, the area between the vaginal opening and the anus, right?
You got it. The Merck Manual said it can vary a lot in length, which I found pretty surprising.
It's true. And that variation is actually important, especially during childbirth.
Childbirth, why is that?
Well, sometimes the perineum can tear as the baby is being delivered vaginally.
Oh, right, I see. So the length can play a role in that. Makes sense. Okay, let's move on to a topic I think a lot of people are curious about.
What's that?
The introitus and the hymen. Can we, debunk some myths surrounding this part of the anatomy?
Debunk some myths, absolutely. The hymen, it's gotten a bad rap.
A bad rap. How so?
Well, people see it as a sign of virginity, but that's just not true.
I knew there had to be more to the story.
There is. It can look really different from woman to woman. A thin ring, a more prominent membrane.
Oh, so it doesn't necessarily break during intercourse then?
Right. And some women might not even notice any changes after their first time.
So it's not like this magical barrier or anything like that?
Nope, not at all. Sadly, that myth has caused so much shame and misinformation.
Yeah, that's not right.
It's important to remember the hymen can be stretched or torn by lots of things, like exercise, using tampons, or even just normal movement.
Really? So much for that myth then. And while we're on the subject of clearing things up, I think some folks might confuse the urethra and the vagina.
Oh yeah, that's a classic mix-up.
So let's set the record straight.
Okay, so they're totally separate structures.
Separate structures, got it.
Yeah.
So where's the urethra exactly?
The urethra, it carries urine from the bladder, and it's located above the vaginal opening.
Okay, so it has its own separate exit. Got it. So back to the vulva. We have the Bartholin's glands. They're nestled near the vaginal opening, right?
That's right.
What do they do?
Well, think of them as the lubrication specialists.
Lubrication specialists. Okay, tell me more.
When they're stimulated, they release a fluid that helps make intercourse more comfortable.
Right, so it's all part of the vulva's ability to protect, facilitate pleasure, and support those biological necessities.
Exactly.
It really is a multitasking marvel. And then we have the clitoris, which honestly often gets overlooked. What makes it so special?
Ooh, the clitoris. Well, unlike other structures down there, its only job is pleasure.
Really? Only pleasure?
Yep, it's packed with sensitive nerve endings and, get this, can become erect, just like the penis.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And it's actually pretty complex. It has several parts, the glands, the shaft, and the crura.
So all those parts contribute to the sensations women experience.
Exactly. It's amazing how this one area is designed for such intense pleasure.
Right, it is. And it's kind of sad, how the clitoris is often misrepresented or even left out of medical textbooks.
I know. And that's a huge disservice to women. Accurate knowledge of our anatomy is so important for understanding our bodies, our pleasure, and our health.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so we've explored the fascinating landscape of the vulva, ready to take a trip to the internal structures.
Lead the way. Let's uncover the pathways that make creation and, well, the body's monthly reset possible.
Love that analogy. First stop, the vagina. It's often thought of as like just a tube, but it's way more than that, right?
Oh, so much more. The vagina is dynamic, it's muscular.
Muscular. How long is it?
In an adult woman, it's about 4 to 5 inches long, and it connects the vulva to the uterus.
So it's the passageway for, well, everything, right?
Exactly. Sperm during intercourse, the baby during childbirth, and menstrual blood.
Wow. Talk about a multitasker. And it's super elastic, isn't it?
That's right. That elasticity is key for, well, both intercourse and childbirth, and it's thanks to estrogen.
Estrogen, the hormone, right.
Yep. But here's the thing. As estrogen levels go down, especially after menopause, the vaginal tissues can become thinner.
Oh, so that's why some women experience discomfort later in life.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that hormonal changes impact the vagina's health and how it works.
Makes sense. Now, at the top of the vagina, we've got the cervix. It's like the gatekeeper to the uterus, right?
Exactly. It's like a vigilant guardian protecting the uterus from bacteria.
That's so important. But I bet it's still vulnerable to STDs, right?
You're right, it is. That's why safe sex practices are so crucial.
For sure. And I've always been amazed by how the cervix changes during childbirth.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? The cervical canal, which is usually pretty narrow, widens like crazy to let the baby through.
Crazy. It really shows how adaptable our bodies are. Speaking of change, the cervix also produces cervical mucus.
Ah, yes, cervical mucus. It's key for fertility.
Okay, break it down for me. How does it work?
So the consistency of the mucus actually changes throughout your cycle.
It does. Why is that?
Well, as your estrogen levels rise before ovulation, the mucus becomes slippery and elastic.
Slippery and elastic. What's that got to do with anything?
It creates a pathway for sperm to swim through the cervix, up into the uterus, and then the fallopian tubes.
So it's all carefully choreographed, like estrogen is telling the cervix to get ready for fertilization.
Exactly. It's like a built-in fertility tracker.
So cool. Okay, let's move on to the uterus itself. It's more than just an empty space, right?
Definitely not. The uterus is powerful, muscular.
Muscular. I guess I never thought about it like that. What's its main purpose?
It's designed to nourish and protect a developing fetus.
Right. And the lining of the uterus, the endometrium, is what builds up every month to prepare for a possible pregnancy.
Precisely. And if pregnancy doesn't happen, the endometrium sheds, resulting in menstruation.
Ah, so it's like a cycle of prepping and renewing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Orchestrated by, you guessed it, hormones.
Hormones are running the show. And on either side of the uterus, we have the ovaries. They're like the control centers, right?
Absolutely. They're the powerhouses, producing the hormones that drive the menstrual cycle.
So they're producing estrogen and progesterone.
You got it. And they release the eggs, too. Those precious cells that could create new life.
And here's something that blew my mind. Girls are born with millions of eggs.
Millions. Each ovary has tons of immature eggs at birth, but only a tiny fraction will ever mature and be released during a woman's reproductive life.
Wow, that's wild. So when an ovary releases an egg, it doesn't go directly into the fallopian tubes, right?
You're right. The fallopian tubes don't directly connect to the ovaries. They have these finger-like projections called fimbriae.
Fimbriae, what do they do?
They kind of hover near the ovaries, and when an egg is released, the fimbriae sweep it up into the fallopian tube.
Oh, so it's more of a catch.
Exactly. And once the egg is in the fallopian tube, these little hair-like structures called cilia help move it along toward the uterus.
Toward the uterus, and that journey takes about how long?
About 3 to 4 days.
And it's usually during that journey in the fallopian tube that fertilization happens.
If a sperm and egg meet, yep, then the fertilized egg keeps traveling down to the uterus.
To the uterus where it can implant and grow. Wow, we've gone from the visible parts of the vulva to the hidden wonders inside.
It's quite a journey, isn't it?
It is. And it's amazing how each part plays such an important role. What do you think is the most awe-inspiring part of it all?
Tough question. I'd have to say the interconnectedness of it all. From the hormones, to the cilia, to the fimbriae.
It all works together so perfectly, and understanding the system is key to taking charge of our reproductive health.
Absolutely. Knowledge helps us make informed decisions about our bodies and our well-being.
And I think we've laid a great foundation today, but our journey isn't over yet.
Right. There's still so much more to discover.
Stay tuned, everyone, for part 2 of our deep dive into female anatomy.
Welcome back to our deep dive into female anatomy.
Back for more.
In part 1, we explore the incredible structures of the vulva and the internal reproductive organs.
We sure did. It was a fascinating tour.
Now let's shift gears a bit. We're going to turn our attention to the hormonal symphony that drives the menstrual cycle.
The hormonal symphony, I like that. But it's a symphony that often gets, well, oversimplified, right?
Right, it's complex. So who are the key players in this orchestra?
Who are the key players? I'm ready to find out.
The main conductors are estrogen and progesterone, both produced by the ovaries.
Estrogen and progesterone. Got it. And what are they doing exactly?
Well, estrogen takes the lead in the first half of the cycle, leading up to ovulation. It's like the stage manager getting the uterus ready for a potential pregnancy.
Oh, I see. So estrogen is all about prepping the uterine lining for a fertilized egg to implant.
Exactly. It stimulates the growth of the endometrium, making it thick and nutrient-rich. A perfect place for an embryo to settle in.
And estrogen also plays a role in making that slippery cervical mucus we talked about, right? The stuff that helps sperm travel.
You got it. It's all about creating the optimal conditions for fertilization.
So estrogen is like the ultimate matchmaker.
I like that.
Okay, so what about progesterone? When does it enter the picture?
Progesterone steps in after ovulation. Once the ovary releases an egg, the follicle that housed the egg transforms into something called the corpus luteum.
The corpus luteum. Okay, what does that do?
Well, the corpus luteum starts producing progesterone.
Ah, so that's where progesterone comes from. And what's progesterone's job?
But progesterone's main role is to maintain that thickened endometrium, keeping it stable and ready for a fertilized egg to implant.
Got it. So if an egg is fertilized, progesterone helps it get comfy. What happens if fertilization doesn't happen?
Good question. If fertilization doesn't occur, the corpus luteum breaks down and progesterone levels plummet.
Plummet? Wow, that's a big change.
It is. And that decline of progesterone is what signals the endometrium to shed, which is what we experience as menstruation.
Ah, so that's what triggers our periods. It's amazing how the rise and fall of these hormones orchestrates this whole cycle.
It's truly remarkable. But it's important to remember that these hormonal fluctuations have effects beyond the uterus.
Beyond the uterus? What do you mean?
They can impact a woman's mood, energy levels, even physical sensations throughout the month.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about the physical changes in the uterus. That makes a lot of sense, actually. I've definitely noticed those shifts in myself.
It's common. And it explains why some women experience premenstrual syndrome, or PMS.
Right, PMS. With all those mood swings and other not-so-fun symptoms.
Exactly. PMS is thought to be linked to the shifting levels of estrogen and progesterone.
So understanding these hormonal patterns can help women manage those symptoms.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
So true.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the reproductive years, but what happens as women get older?
Menopause. A major transition.
Menopause. It's defined as 12 consecutive months without a period, right?
That's right. Basically, the ovaries gradually stop producing estrogen and progesterone.
So no more periods, no more babies.
Essentially. But these hormonal shifts can cause a lot of changes, both physical and emotional.
Like hot flashes and night sweats. I've heard those can be pretty intense.
Those are classic symptoms. But every woman experiences menopause differently. Some have minimal discomfort, others have more intense symptoms.
What causes hot flashes? They sound so sudden and uncomfortable.
We don't know for sure, but we think it's related to the decline in estrogen.
Estrogen again. Okay, so how does declining estrogen cause hot flashes?
It seems to affect the hypothalamus. That's the part of the brain that regulates body temperature.
So it's like the brain's thermostat is going a bit haywire.
You could say that. The drop in estrogen makes the hypothalamus super sensitive to even small temperature changes.
Interesting. What about the changes in the vagina we talked about earlier? How does menopause affect that?
As estrogen goes down, the vaginal tissues can become thinner and drier, which can be uncomfortable, especially during intercourse.
Right, we talked about that. It's good to know there are treatments available to help with that, though.
Absolutely.
So menopause is about way more than just the end of periods. There are all these other significant changes happening, too.
Many changes.
Sure.
And it's important for women to be aware of them and to talk to their doctor if they have concerns.
That's such an important point. We need to be having open and honest conversations about menopause.
I couldn't agree more. Knowledge and communication are key to navigating these life stages with confidence.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground, From the anatomy of the female reproductive system to the hormones that drive the menstrual cycle and menopause.
We have.
It's truly a remarkable system, but we haven't even touched on the emotional and social aspects of female reproductive health.
Oh, that's a whole other layer. And an important one.
Right. The cultural messages we get about menstruation, sexuality, and aging can really affect a woman's relationship with her body.
It's true. There are so many societal expectations and taboos around female reproductive health.
Taboos? Like what?
Well, think about how periods are often portrayed, or how menopause is seen as this negative thing.
Right. It's like we're not supposed to talk about these things openly and honestly. We need to break down those barriers.
Absolutely. We need to create a more supportive environment where women feel comfortable talking about their experiences without shame or judgment.
I couldn't agree more. We need to empower women to embrace their bodies and advocate for their health and well-being.
Yes, it's about fostering body literacy, self-acceptance, and open communication.
I love that. Body literacy. It's about understanding how our bodies work, how they change, and what feels normal for us as individuals.
And feeling empowered to get help when something isn't right. Too often, women ignore their symptoms or are embarrassed to talk about them.
It's like we're taught to minimize our experiences.
Exactly. We need to encourage women to trust their instincts and be proactive about their health care.
Yes. It's time to change the narrative around female reproductive health.
For sure. We need to shift the focus from shame and silence to knowledge and empowerment.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about the biology, the hormones, the social and emotional aspects. It's a lot to process.
It is.
What are some key takeaways for our listeners? What do we really want them to remember?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that every woman's experience is unique. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to reproductive health.
That's so important. We're all different.
We are. It's about understanding your own body, your own cycle, your own individual needs.
And not being afraid to ask questions.
Exactly. It's about feeling confident to seek information and advocate for your own health and well-being.
So, knowledge is power, communication is key. What else?
I think it's important to encourage women to be proactive in their health care. Don't wait until something is seriously wrong to seek help.
Right. Prevention is key. And I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to shift gears just a bit.
Shift gears. Okay, I'm intrigued.
We've talked a lot about the biological and social aspects of female reproductive health, but I think it's important to acknowledge the emotional and spiritual dimension as well.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Our bodies aren't just machines. They're vessels of creativity, intuition, and connection.
Exactly. And for many women, there's this deep sense of power and spirituality that's connected to their reproductive system.
It's about honoring that connection, celebrating our bodies, and embracing every stage of womanhood.
Beautifully said.
I think that's the perfect way to transition into the final part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, everyone, as we explore those emotional and spiritual aspects of female anatomy and reproductive health in Part 3. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the fascinating world of female anatomy.
Part 3 already. Wow, time flies.
It does. We've covered so much ground, the structures, the hormones, the social and cultural influences.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has. But as we hinted at the end of Part 2, there's another dimension we want to explore.
Another dimension. Okay, tell me more.
The emotional and spiritual connection many women feel to their bodies, and especially their reproductive systems.
Right, that's a part of the conversation that often gets overlooked.
It does. So how about we talk about that now? What are some ways women experience this connection, this emotional and spiritual connection to their reproductive systems?
Well, many women describe a sense of deep intuition, almost a wisdom that's in their bodies, especially in the pelvic area.
It's like a knowing that's beyond logic or reason.
Exactly. It's a feeling of being connected to a source of power that's ancient and personal.
A power that's often linked to femininity, right?
Right. And this energy can be expressed in so many ways, from creating new life to creative expression through art, music, writing, all sorts of things.
It's like our bodies are vessels, not just biological machines, but vessels of creativity and connection.
I love that. And I think it's so relevant when you think about the menstrual cycle.
The menstrual cycle, how so?
Well, the ebb and flow of hormones and energy every month. It's a powerful metaphor for the cyclical nature of life itself. Growth, release, renewal.
So many women say that by tuning into their cycles, they gain a deeper understanding of their emotions and creative energy.
Exactly. It's like learning to dance with your body's natural rhythm. And some women even report feeling a heightened intuition or spiritual connection during specific phases of their cycle.
Like around ovulation or menstruation.
Exactly. It makes sense that those hormonal shifts could influence our emotions and even our spiritual state.
It does. And it's not just about the menstrual cycle either, right? The transitions women go through, things like puberty, pregnancy, menopause, those are all transformative experiences.
Huge transitions.
Yeah.
And they can really shape how we see ourselves and our bodies.
They can be challenging, no doubt, but also empowering.
Definitely empowering. Take menopause, for example. In our culture, it's often viewed as this time of loss and decline.
Right, but it can also be a time of liberation and self-discovery.
Exactly. It's a time to reclaim your body,
Yep.
to shed those societal expectations, and embrace the wisdom that comes with age.
And it's a time to redefine what it means to be a woman, to celebrate our strength and resilience.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope we've shown you that the female reproductive system is so much more than just biology.
There's so much more.
It's a source of creativity, intuition, connection. It's a sacred space, really.
It deserves to be honored and celebrated, that's for sure. It's about embracing our bodies in all their complexity and appreciating the emotional and spiritual dimensions of being female.
And it's about sharing our stories, challenging those outdated norms, and supporting each other.
What a powerful message. I think our listeners have so much to think about after this deep dive. Thanks for sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure. These are important conversations to have.
They are. And to our listeners, keep exploring these themes. Connect with your own wisdom and celebrate the incredible power and beauty of the female body. Until next time.